glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way. From the earth to the cross, my debt to pay. From the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. You came from heaven to earth to show the way. From the earth to the cross, my debt to pay.
It's a real pleasure to be with you again. I'm really honored for the chance to share the time with you. I hope your day's been a good day. It's been an absolutely beautiful day. Down in Houston, it's usually around 150, 170 degrees year-round. Now, winter comes for a couple of days, somewhere around December or January, but then it leaves. It's usually a weekend. It's always neat. I grew up in southern Illinois, so I grew up very accustomed to a climate similar to the one that you all experience. So that was just our growing up years. And then when you see the forecast to drop below 60 degrees or so in Houston, I mean, these Texans start to panic. They don't know what to expect or what's happening. They make a run on Lowe's to insulate their pipes, and they're terrified. They're buying as much water and bread and eggs and all those things that you can imagine. So I will report to them when I get back that it was a cool and crisp 37 degrees when I walked this morning, and let them know that I survived. I was okay. I did not fall into hypothermia. It was an absolutely beautiful morning, a wonderful, wonderful day. Had a great lunch and time together with your Brian, and he was a great encouragement to me. I was so thankful for that time with him. Took me to a local hot chicken spot, and it was just right. And we enjoyed that time together, and that was a wonderful opportunity. And then he went home to cook for tomorrow, and I did not want to hinder him from that. I mean, that will just be a treat, too, to share in your fellowship tomorrow. So it's been a wonderful day today. I hope it's been a good day for you as well, and I hope that you can be encouraged by our time that we share here this evening. I was on the phone with my Mindy when I was coming over this evening, and we have concluded a ladies' day down at Champions in Houston today. They had a full day, well attended. They had nearly 100 ladies come and share for their ladies' day today. So they were so excited. I think they prepared for around 65, and so they underprepared. Isn't that wonderful? And they were outmatched. Now they had everything everybody needed, and so that was all good. And it was a wonderful day for them. So it's been an encouraging day all the way around. As we shared last night, we laid a foundation for the world in which we live. And I know that you know the world in which we live is a changing world. Have you ever stopped to consider the rapid pace of change that we see in the world? Sometimes it's just dizzying, is it not, how rapidly things change? Can you remember, as I remember, when I would come in to see my parents as I had grown in my teenage years, and then when I moved out in my early college years, I would come home and I would help my parents with technology. Did you play that role, helping your parents with technology? I would play the role helping my parents with technology, but here was my role. I had to help the VCR not flash 12 on the screen. That was the role I played. I had to help set the clock on the VCR. That's what got in my parents' way. I mean, that persnickety clock just was always nagging at them, always blinking 12. I mean, some folks today don't even have a clue what a VCR is. I mean, that's how rapid change has been in the world today just by way of technology. If you just stop and take away some kind of flippant illustration like that and think about the way the world changes, no wonder we see so much of a change taking place in our own lives and in our own well-being. And so I want for God's people, and I want for individuals to know that there is a way to address that change, and there's a way to navigate through that change so that it does not overwhelm us in our lives, and so that we are not burdened through the nature of the changes that come, but not only that, through the emotional and mental and cognitive impact that it can have on our lives. A lot of change can be a lot of stress for an individual to navigate. And as a result, we've got to be able to find ways that are better equipped to help us navigate through all of those changes. I want you to think about some of the words from the Word and how it impacts us in our ways of thinking and in our ways of doing. One of our foundational passages comes from Paul. He says, if you set your mind on the things of the flesh, that is really where your mind is going to stay. It's going to stay on things of the flesh. But if you set your minds on the things of the Spirit, the things of the Spirit of God, then you're going to be bringing into your life the things that are of the Spirit of God. Think about this. We considered last night that our thinking is so powerful powerful and poignant that if we think constantly on the things that are true, or as Paul says, whatever things are true or noble, just or pure or lovely or of good report, if there's anything praiseworthy, if there's anything that is of virtue in any of those areas or categories, always think on those things. I mean, how do we bring ourselves to the place where we always think on those things? I love what Solomon says in Proverbs 23 and verse 7. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. I mean, if you believe those things about yourself to some degree or another that you tell yourself on some level of regularity or another, it ultimately comes about that you begin to believe those things. Working with individuals from time to time that are riddled either with anxiety or who are burdened with depression, it's startling to see the narratives that play in their mind as they reveal those things to you and as they confess those things out loud. They begin to talk about the records that play over and over and over. I think perhaps at one point in time in all of our lives, we can probably pinpoint something that we told ourselves about ourselves that was patently false. But the reality was we reaped something out of that pattern of thinking into our life that was not helpful. It was not beneficial that we thought those things regularly. Proverbs gives us this nugget of gold when it says, if you think this thing in your heart on a regular, continual basis, if this thing is the manner that's always in the focus of your pattern of thinking, then that's how you will see yourself. And it becomes this ultimate or new reality. One of the things that's a challenge in our world today, I think, in a lot of respects, is how so many people see the idea of the way that we feel. And in our world today, we sort of operate with this notion that feelings trump our thoughts. I don't know if that impacts you in some way or not, or if you just sort of survey that in the world or the landscape around you. But a lot of people seem to operate under the notion that if I'm feeling this way, then the way that I'm feeling must be some indicator of a truth or of a reality. It must be real if I feel this way. Does that make sense? It must be some kind of evidence that's being demonstrated to me if I carry around a certain feeling or a certain emotion. And so I want to unpack that for just a moment if we can. I want to think about the idea of what is impacting which area of our life. If I ask you, as we shared last night, if I ask you to feel an emotion just on the spot, can you do that? If I ask you, come on, be outraged, can you do that right now? Can you feel wrath? Somebody just feel wrath right now. Go. It's not going to happen. We'll be here for a while waiting for that to happen. Now, if I ask you to think about a time when you were filled with wrath or outraged or sad or scared or lonely, you can think of that time, and pretty soon that feeling, that emotion begins to emerge. Herein lies the pattern between our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors. There is no feeling that exists apart from a pattern of thinking. But in a lot of our lives, some of the reality that weighs in is this. A lot of our patterns of thinking are so very familiar to us, it's almost like an involuntary muscle response or an involuntary biological or physiological response. We don't have to put a lot of thinking into it. Anybody in here thinking about their heart beating? We are now, right? Well, you weren't before. How about the breaths that you're taking in and exhaling? I mean, nobody is sitting there thinking, okay, breathe, exhale, inhale, exhale. You wouldn't get a lot more done in life if that was the constant thought process. It's just happening. I would suggest to you that sometimes in our lives, a lot of our emotional responses are born out of a lot of our cognitive or thinking processes that have become, if you will, automatic. This is the pattern of thinking that's always been in place, but we've never really been challenged to think about how we are thinking. We just respond in that manner of thinking. Does this make sense? Yes, no, maybe? All right, let's go a little further. So I like to summarize things maybe in a better way. I'm really trying not to make two things too complicated, because in my own life, things are complicated enough. So I like to keep things pretty simple. I want you to think about this. Can you think on things that are not true? Is it possible to think on something that's false? Yes, no, maybe? All right, I call those false notions. When you think upon something that is false, when you think about an idea or a concept or an issue or a scenario or a situation or even an identification of yourself, you think about yourself in some way. It's completely and totally untrue. It's a false notion. What do you think that creates? It creates feelings. Buddy, you're all over it. It creates real emotions. Watch this. False notions create real emotions. Is the emotion true? Yes, no, maybe? Yes, absolutely. The emotion is real. Is the thought process rooted in truth? Likely not. In most cases, it's not. But what happens physiologically? Physiologically, we begin to feel something. And out of that feeling comes what we declare as our own evidence. Well, this thing must be true. How come? Because I feel this way. Isn't that remarkable? It's startling, really, when you stop and think about it. If I said the name James Dobson, does that mean anything to you? Focus on the family, James Dobson. He wrote a book many years ago, and the title of that book was Life on the Edge. And he wrote about a number of family dynamics and circumstances and scenarios. Very, very good book, very resourceful book. In that book, he tells about a time when he and his wife were living in California, and it was during the era of the Summer of Sam. Do some of you remember the time or the era of the Summer of Sam? It was a rampage that was tearing through a suburb of Los Angeles, California, where a maniac serial killer was on the loose. And the news media and all other outlets had labeled that time and that season of the year as the Summer of Sam. I mean, they were warning the residents of this suburban area, when you go home at night, you leave your external lights on, you lock your doors, you secure your home, you make sure that you're not out walking past a certain time by yourself. And they were really hyping the area because of the level of threat that existed in that area. Well, Dobson goes on to tell the story. One night, he and his wife are lying in bed. And as they are lying in bed, they hear a horrible, horrible noise in the house. They both shoot up out of bed like a rocket. And they run to the bedroom door, which the bedroom door is locked. They go to the bedroom door. Remember, they're living in this era of the Summer of Sam. They go to the bedroom door, and James begins to take the doorknob and turn and pull. Why? Because he's going to go confront whoever may be in the house, and he is going to intervene. Simultaneously, his wife is at the same door. She has dropped down below James, unbeknownst to him, and she is pushing against the door. Why? Because if there's somebody in that house, lo and behold, they are not getting in this bedroom. And so while he is pulling and she is pushing, what do you think he's thinking? He can feel resistance, right? And he's thinking, there is someone in this house on the other side of that door, and they are trying to keep me in this bedroom. She is pushing on the door, and she can feel what? She can feel someone pulling. And what's she thinking? She's thinking, they're on the outside of the door. They're trying to get in, and they are both terrified. It wasn't until one screams out and cries out to the other that they begin to realize in that moment that they're both fighting against the other. And then when they open the door and they realize there's no one on the outside, it's just the house cat had made a disastrous mess in the kitchen. All was for naught. So the moral of the story is, don't have cats. No, the moral, well, maybe. But another moral of the story, you can think yourself into a frenzy. Were they feeling real emotions? Yes. Was their thinking based in truth? Sadly, no. Their thinking was based in a lot of presumption. And we presume one aspect and then another and then another and then another and then another. And what does false thinking or false notions, what do false notions create? Real emotions, which lead to what? Every time they lead to big commotions. I mean, false thinking leads to real feeling, which then can bring about big, big trouble. I mean, how do we rein that in? What do we do if that's part of our life? I mean, how do we take control or take charge of those aspects? I want you to go with me for just a moment. I want to look at some things that impact us in our life and in the way that we feel. But I think one of the best places to examine this very concept is found in Psalm 32. It's one of my favorites of the Psalms. Look at Psalm 32. It is a beautiful passage, and just unpack it with me for a moment, if you will. Here's the preamble to this psalm. David sets the stage. This is verse 1 of Psalm 32. Blessed is he whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord does not impute iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. Let me ask you, just according to the psalm, who's a happy man? Who would be a happy man? Who would be someone that's happy? The forgiven. I mean, that's how David is characterizing a happy man. Blessed, happy is the man to whom the Lord does not impute iniquity, whose transgression is forgiven. You want to see the picture of a happy man. The picture of a happy man is somebody who is forgiven. Now, do you want to see a picture of a miserable man? Keep going. Look at verse 3. When I kept silent, my bones grew old through my groaning all the day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My vitality was turned into the drought of summer. I acknowledged my sin to you, and my iniquity I have not hidden. Think about the nature of what's being said. When I kept silent, what happened to his bones? How did he feel physically? Old. Have you ever gone to bed tired and woke up tired? My vitality was turned to the drought of summer. Look at what else he says. Not only did he ache, not only did he have no energy, but he said, day and night I felt this way. I mean, it was inescapable. There was just this constant foreboding pressure. I don't know if you've had experience with, or maybe you yourself have dealt with, those who are in places of depressive states or depression in and of itself. And you may ask them, and your motive is pure, and your motive is good, and your motive is gracious. You may ask them, what's wrong? And they may respond to you, I don't know. I don't know. But I have no energy. I don't want to eat. I hurt from head to toe, and I can't tell you why. David is capturing this picture of a man who is eaten alive. Now, not every circumstance of depression is the circumstance of David that he describes in Psalm 32. But ultimately, many things are brought by the remedy of what David says here, at least in portion. Look at what he says in verse 5. I acknowledged my sin to you, and my iniquity I have not hidden. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord. What did he say in verse 3? Why did his body hurt? When I kept silent. I don't know what to talk about. Well, maybe not. Let's just start talking. Let's walk through it. And then look at what he says. I realized that I have been carrying this silence for so long. I've got to say something. And so in this regard, David says, I confessed. I spoke about the things I was carrying with me. In that very concept, you can see, I think legitimately so, the nature of how heavy aspects and the issues of life are in our lives and on our bodies. I may tell you some things that you've not heard before. I may tell you some things that you're very familiar with. But I want to walk you through just a few thoughts concerning the aspects of the world and the burden in which we live and the real burden of broken thinking that comes about in our world. Did you know that mental illness is more common than all of these diseases, cancer, diabetes, or heart disease combined? Did you realize that? Did you realize that people struggle more with emotional and social distresses than we do with physical diseases of the body? It's really quite remarkable when you stop and think about it. Did you know that in the last 8 to 10 years, in young people, we have seen anxiety rise by 30%, depression rise by almost the same measure. We are living in a time when we're watching a generation grow into greater levels of anxiety and deal with stronger, higher levels of depression. Did you know among boys and girls there has been a sharp increase in the youngest among us? Did you realize that young girls predominantly for many years were diagnosed with more social emotional disorders than boys? They were likely to be diagnosed 4 times as much to 1 time for every boy, 4 times for every girl, higher in rate and ratio for things like anxiety and depression. But only within the last 5 to 10 years have we started to see the number rise in young men. Used to, young boys were identified with more behavioral disorders. That is to say, they would be identified as being more combative or being more violent or being prone to more aggressive disorders. But now we're starting to see them be impacted on the social, emotional level as well, anxiety and depression, growing in and among our young people. Did you know when you think about anxiety, like we said last night, we're not thinking about the thing that we need to get us out of the burning building. We're thinking about the thing that goes into the excess, that goes to the place and the level that does not bring us any help. When I taught undergraduate school years ago, I would teach a course in physiological psychology. One of the texts I would use was a text entitled, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Do you know why zebras don't get ulcers? Do you? Yes, no, maybe? Do you want to know why zebras don't get ulcers? I'm glad you asked. I'll tell you why zebras don't get ulcers. So the guy's name is Robert Sapolsky. He is a really neat guy. He's a non-believer. In fact, he has probably said some pretty harsh and critical things about people who are Christian-minded, who are faith-based. But that aside, it's remarkable, and it's also ironic because many of the things that he says and teaches so coincide with the aspects of creationism. It's beautiful, really. It's beautiful. That being said, Sapolsky was a behaviorist, and he looked at the animal kingdom for many years, and he drew this unique instance between the difference between certain animals and human beings. He said zebras don't get ulcers because zebras stand at the watering hole on the African plain and they drink water. And the reason that zebras don't get ulcers is because zebras don't stand at the watering hole on the African plain, obsessing over the hyena that isn't chasing them that might eat them. But human beings are the only creature on the face of the planet that can be in a non-threatening, non-violent, non-life concerning situation. We're the only creature on the face of the planet who can be in the seated position and alter instantly our neurobiology and our neurophysiology, and instantaneously bring ourselves into a state of panic and excess when there is no active threat around other than the one that resides within our heart and mind. That's pretty remarkable if you stop and think about it. In some ways, it is indicative of what God said in Psalm 139. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And that in and of itself bears some observation. If I have the power to take myself there, do I have the power to regulate myself and bring myself out of that place? Do you know that we have understood now, by our design and research of understanding the nature of anxiety disorders and the impact they have, the physiological impact on people's lives with anxiety is remarkable. It leads everywhere from migraine or tension headaches to heart disease to chronic respiratory disorder, high blood pressure, gastrointestinal disorders, sexual dysfunctions, aches and pains in the muscles and joints. People at times who are riddled with anxiety, going back to what David said, when I kept silent, my bones ached within me. We have a fancy word for those body aches that cannot be pinpointed physiologically. It's the kind of body ache where you go to the doctor and you ask the doctor, "Doctor, I am hurting in this place and I'm hurting in this way," and the doctor runs all the tests and he tells you what? There's nothing wrong. We can't find anything wrong. And you know in your body there is an issue. Now, physiologically speaking, there may very well be an issue. But it may very well be an issue, not in every instance, but in many instances. It may be born out of a pattern of thinking that exists that is now exacerbated. It's revealed itself into my body, and now I have what would be identified as a somatization disorder. The Greek word for the body is soma. I have a soma disorder. I have a body disorder. Why? Because I'm carrying around such pain, and I don't know what to do with it. And my body aches, my joints ache, my muscles ache. I go to bed tired. I wake up tired. I sleep all night and I'm tired. I sleep all day and I'm tired. I don't want to eat. I don't want to move. My vitality is turned to the drought of summer. I feel as lost can be. I don't know what's going on in my life. I mean, it riddles the body. And this we know by a fact. When you think about anxiety and depression, we refer to those as co-occurring or comorbid issues. There's comorbidity. When you see anxiety, oftentimes you will see depression, and vice versa. They are similar, but they're also very distinct. In the nature of their distinction, you see sadness and frustration, the thought of worthlessness or irritability, a loss of interest in normal life's activities, thoughts of suicide or death, tiredness, disturbance in sleep or appetite. When you think about anxiety, there is this trembling, there's this increased rate of breathing, a constant feeling of nervousness or powerlessness, having a sense of impending danger or panic. It's like you're waiting for the world to cave in on you, but you have no idea why. You can't pinpoint one thing, and that's the reality of it. In your mind, it isn't just one thing. It's an entire series of things that begin to pile up and add up. You have a high heart rate. There's a constant sweating, if you will. And then when you think about how they're similar, a restlessness, an excessive worrying, or an agitation. Those who are in anxious or depressive states are in this constant state of hypervigilance. I mean, they're always looking out for what's the next thing coming. Remember, I told you last night, we live in a world today where we're trying to self-medicate. We're trying to take care of these anxious or depressive feelings on our own. Or we're trying to turn to a variety of things, either be it regulated prescriptions or unregulated prescriptions in some form or another to take away the feeling. We want to feel some kind of pleasure. A few years back, a friend and I sat down and we talked about this at depth. And we walked away with this idea, and I have to attribute the name of the concept to my friend Steve. We walked away thinking about the dopamine vortex, how we just want to feel good. And the feel-good hormone that your body produces is dopamine. We want to feel something better, or we want to feel something different in our life aside from all of these other anxious or depressive feelings that we feel, so we look for something better. What's a simple way to describe that? The simplest way to describe that I know of is this: what dopamine does in your body. We just came out of the season of Halloween, yes? And did you all have any trick-or-treaters come around your place or pass out any candy? Did you pass out any Reese's peanut butter cups? Did you do that? How many, in the normal package, how many Reese's peanut butter cups come in the normal package? Huh? Two. Right? In the normal package, there's 2 Reese's peanut butter cups in there, right? Not the bag. Maybe you thought I was asking about the whole bag. Like, oh man, he is really getting specific. There's 74 in a bag. I don't know. There's 2 in one package, right? And you eat, how many, is that a favorite candy for anybody in here that love a Reese's? Do you mind, do you eat a Reese's peanut butter cup? I mean, the pack. Before you came, hey, did we practice this?
No.
We did. I just want everyone to know we did not practice this. All right, so if you don't mind, when you eat the first one, how is it? Oh, man, did you hear that? When I eat the first one, he said it's not enough. Now, what happens when you eat the second one? Did you see that? Did you see that? Did you all see that? What happens when you eat the second? When you eat the first one, oh, I got to have more. It's not enough. And then watch. When you eat the second one, did you see his response? It's all right. Bless you, Jerry. I want to stress again. Did we practice this? We did not practice this. Can I tell you, the first hit of dopamine that we hit is the highest hit that we'll ever hit if we haven't hit it in some time. Did you follow that? The first hit of dopamine that we hit is the highest hit if we haven't hit it in some time. And then whatever hit we use to follow it up with falls always short. Always. Always. So what do we have to do? We have to buy the king-size pack, right? We have to get the pack that has 4. In our lives, emotionally speaking, if we're trying to feel something we don't want to feel, we dive off into the dopamine vortex. And whatever it is that we're feeling that we don't want to feel, we dive off deep into it. And if it's not enough in the first dive, we dive a second and a third and a fourth. I mean, just think about it. I'm not telling you that any and all of these things are necessarily evil in and of themselves. I'm just telling you, if the mind can conceive something to be latched on to, it'll latch on to it. For some people, it's caffeine. For other people, it's alcohol. For some people, it's pornography. For some people, it's video gaming or social media or being on your cell phone or your tablet. For some people, it's gambling. For some people, it's going to the tattoo parlor once and twice and a dozen times and constantly having that physical sensation of that which is touching the body. You think about the nature of what's going on, and so many times you're diving off trying to figure out, how do we not feel this way? Well, remember where we started. We started with patterns of thinking that brought about patterns of feeling, that brought about patterns of behaving. And if our thinking is broken and our feeling is broken, it will lead to broken ways of being or doing. But if we continually go back into that same pattern, it will constantly bring that same result to us. One author has observed this: the world is more addictive than it was 40 years ago. More things we like will mean more things we have to be careful about. Most people won't, unfortunately. One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. And it may be one of the most neglected fruits of the Spirit. You think about the nature of it. observe this. Dopamine receptor downregulation over time causes us to reach deeper into the vortex in search of an ever-elusive peace. It's not just one or two or three or four. It's a dozen peanut butter cups or two, or the whole bag. It's whatever it takes to not feel that way. And I know that's a flippant illustration, but it's so reasonable in its effect because we get it when it comes to that sort of stuff. We understand, oh, that is what's going on. But we are continually losing out on feeling the kind of peace that we're seeking to feel. Here's another observation. The big problem, two senses in which one can live a normal life will be driven even further apart. One sense is what we spoke of and mentioned last night, the normal aspect of life, that is statistically normal. How many people have that phone? Most everybody in here, right? How many people think it's absurd to see somebody on their phone? None of us think that's absurd. None of us think that's out of the ordinary. That is statistically normal, what everyone else does. The other sense is the sense we mean when we talk about the normal operating range of a piece of machinery. We call that functionally normal. All right, how's the thing supposed to work? How is the thing supposed to work? It's what works best. Already, someone trying to live well would seem eccentrically abstemious in most of the U.S. That's just a fancy way of saying somebody trying to do the right thing, but the very different thing would look like their life is so bizarre. Anybody listen to Dave Ramsey, the financial guru? Financial guru Dave Ramsey says when debt is dumb and cash is king, and the new status symbol is what? The paid off home mortgage taking place of the BMW in the driveway, right? And everybody else has the BMW in the driveway, and few people have the paid off mortgage. And he says, your family, when they learn that you're trying to not borrow money and you're trying to live on a budget and you're only going to spend the money that you have to spend and not borrow any other money, Dave Ramsey says your family's going to look at you like you've what? Lost your mind. Friends, when the world starts to see us look different from the statistically normal way that most everybody operates, which includes the way we deal with our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors, be ready for the world to say, what is wrong? But here's the real beautiful part. Be ready for some to come up to you and say, can you tell me how you're doing that? Because I am riddled. I'm riddled with guilt, with anxiety. I don't know what to expect. It seems like my house is in chaos. What are you doing differently? I mean, when the world sees somebody navigating, watch this, the same stuff they have to navigate, but you're doing it with a peace that surpasses all understanding, they want to know, where'd you find that? Where'd you find that? Now, they may be like Nicodemus asking Jesus in the dead of night, where'd you come from? We know you are a man sent from God. Remember John 3? Nicodemus came to Jesus in the dead of night. He didn't want anybody to see him talking to that Jewish teacher. He didn't want any of his co-workers to know who he was hanging out with. But he asked him the question above all questions. We know you're from God. Tell me more. When the world sees us living differently, they'll know there's something different about us. Watch this. Living in this vortex makes us self-focused. It increases our fear. It increases narcissism and division and shallowness, our weight and our psychosis. It decreases our mental and physical and emotional health, and it's devastating God's people. And this is not the normal that we are called to accept. And so it doesn't mean you need to change like that. It means that we come to the place where we realize No, there is a different way for us to live. There is a better way for us to think and then to feel and then to act. We come back to Romans 8 and 5. Those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. It is just the way that we have been called to live in the place and the presence of Christ. Does this make sense? Yes, no, maybe? Tell me what you're hearing, or maybe you've got a question or something you're thinking, or just a comment you'd like to make. Let me hear from you. Let me know where this is striking you or how we can help further the conversation. What's on your mind when you hear this kind of information? What stands out to you? Jerry, are you going to eat any more peanut butter cups? It's okay. It's all right. Yeah, I mean, you can. You can. What do you think when you hear something like this, Jerry? What's going through your mind? Wow. Wow. Did you all hear that? That is so, thank you for that. That's remarkable for you to share that. That Jerry said there are days at work where he is here, and then there are days at work where he is not at that same level. He's at a lower level, a different level, and then the world around him sees that. And so, Jerry, you're showing yourself to say, I want to show them that better way. I want to show them how it's possible to do that. God bless you for that, Jerry. I think that is so critical in all of our lives. What else are you thinking? Yes, sir. Tell me your name. Jared. I tell you what, you all make it easy on folks. You got Jerry, you got Jared, you got Brian, and Brian, and Brian. You threw a Brad in there. There's a Brett. I mean, you all are some of the nicest folks on the planet, making it simple. There's Emily. I had to ask Emily her name twice. Forgive me for that. But I mean, you're tossing the names in there. It is grand how you're doing that. Jared, go ahead, my friend. Jared makes such a beautiful point that you're narrowing the scope of the range of your emotions. And that is such a field that is diminished in your own level of well-being. Remember, this coincides so well with what Jesus said on the cross. Remember when Jesus was offered an analgesic? He was offered sour wine mixed with gall. That was an analgesic. And what did he do? He refused it. And in doing that, what was he essentially saying? I'm going to feel it all. You know, one of the challenges that comes out of that, Jared, is that we live in a world today where we tell ourselves, if I feel an intense emotion too intensely, what do we say? I won't be able to handle it. Do you know that to be true? Do you know that to be true? I mean, just be honest. You don't know that to be true. You think that is true, and if you think that is true, then you will create a feeling that it is true, and then you will behave in a manner that is reflective of that way of thinking. But that thought is not true. I won't be able to handle it. You don't know that to be the case. The other response is, will I feel something intensely? Likely. Will it be greater than me? Not necessarily. Because you have felt that thing. Yea, though I walk around the valley of the shadow of death. Is that what he said? Yea, though I try to find every way to avoid the valley of the shadow. That's not what he said. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I'm not going to let my thoughts get ahead of where I am. I mean, that's truly the essential aspect of not having a divided mind. Were there other thoughts or comments or observations? Those were two excellent thoughts. Were there other thoughts or comments, things that you're hearing, or maybe questions or thoughts of, hey, could you say that differently? Yes, sir. To self-regulate. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes, sir. Not at all. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I don't know if you all could hear. Remind me your name. Bill. Bill was sharing the Bill was sharing just that dynamic of the struggle between really delineating depression and anxiety, and how the two, as we shared earlier, they do share a lot in common, but they're also distinct. But then do we fall on that side to say we need some type of physiological intervention to change that, or are there habitual patterns we can fall into? Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, well, yes. Yes. Yeah, well, we're going to find out if they don't know already. You're exactly right. Yes. Yes. Yes, sir. Yes. In so many times when someone is struggling, and thank you for sharing that in this moment, when someone is struggling in that vein or in that regard, our touch points with them, and not necessarily just asking, "How are you today?" but our touch point with them, letting them know that we're present and that we care and that we love them, and not necessarily demanding something of them, but just inviting them along. "I'm going X, Y, and Z. Would you like to come?" We're reminding them that there is that connection. I read of a man's example with his own struggle and depression for chronic for many years, how that his brother sent him more than 700 postcards in the course of a span of many years, and those were just served as those touch points of, I know that someone cares for me, and I know that someone is there. I think too, when we consider the intervention of psychotropics and of habit-forming behaviors that are useful and beneficial, it's really the difference between riding a unicycle, a bicycle, a tricycle, or a four-wheeler. When you think about which one of those would be easier, well, I mean, we're falling on the side of the four wheels likely every time. But we know a bicycle is a lot easier to manage than a unicycle, and a tricycle is more stable than a bicycle. And so the more wheels that we have on this thing moving together is essential. But it's also critical to understand, too, that just because I've introduced something chemically doesn't mean that now I have the remedy. And that is the great point that you reinforce. It is so essential. My father and my grandfather and my brother were all diabetic, and so they took prescription medicines to help regulate their diabetes. If they had not gone through habit changes and diet changes, their aspect of health would have been far greater diminished. An individual that takes their prescription medication for diabetes and then enjoys a McDonald's breakfast and a Burger King lunch and a Pizza Hut dinner and then is confused why their blood sugar levels aren't improving, needs to reconcile the difference between those two categories. The one that takes their regular diabetic medication and adjusts their diet and their habits and their level of movement, they'll begin to see that regulatory come into play. It's the difference between a unicycle and a four-wheeler. You start to recognize where those aspects lie out. Elijah is that key element. Elijah comes out of one of his greatest victories, the victory at Mount Carmel. Yes, comes off one of his greatest highs in his life, and then he hits one of the lowest lows in his life. Elijah comes off of Mount Carmel, and he goes home and he makes a fatal error. Do you know what the fatal error is that Elijah makes? He checks the mailbox. That was his fatal error. He checked the mailbox. And what was waiting on him in the mailbox? Hate mail. Hate mail was waiting. Jezebel had sent him a letter and said what? I'm coming for you, and I'm going to take you out. That's what she said to him. And what did he believe? He believed it was going to happen. He believed his life was over. He believed that God had forsaken him and everything was done, and it was all for naught. And so he goes away. He isolates himself. He isolates himself because he starts thinking his life is over. And then God intervenes and says, I don't want you to think that way. First thing he calls Elijah to do is to do what? He calls him to rest. He calls him to stop and to rest. I need you to lay down and sleep. One of the things that we realize in dealing with depression is that there is a lack of regularity in sleep patterns and in sleep habits, depression and anxiety both. Again, it's indicative of the society in which we live. We likely are all running at full pace, and we stay up late, and we get up early. If we get up early at all, we're likely getting up at the very last minute that we have to get up in order to get on out the door, right? We stayed up too late, and then we've had a love affair with the snooze button of a morning. We flirt with that thing until the last possible second, and then we hit it. The last time we touch the snooze button is a touch in wrath. We slam the snooze button because we know now is the moment I have to get up. And we get up and we run to the shower, we run to the coffee pot, we yell at the kids, come on, you got to get ready. Why don't you have your stuff? You should have had your stuff. You're supposed to be in the car. We're going to be late. We get to the car, we get to the school, we get to the job, we get to lunch, we get back to the job, we get home, and we're done. And then we say, I deserve some me time, and we take some me time, and we stay up till it's way past me time, and we go to sleep, only to get up and do it all again. Our sleep habits are garbage. They're awful. And so God says to Elijah, you need to rest. So he rests. And then God says to Elijah, you need to wake up and you need to eat. Our diets are terrible. Elijah is fed, and God feeds him, and it's a benefit. How many of you like sugar? Anybody? Yes, no, maybe? I know. Listen, I was right there. Our third child, when she was born, she will soon be 13. Lauren was telling me last night, she's 13. Our daughter Kinley is 13. They would just be two peas in a pod. And so Kinley's soon to be 13. When Kinley was shortly born, not long after she was born, I had a health crisis that hit me. I had just had a doctor's visit, and the doctor said, everything checks out, all your numbers are okay, but he said, you're technically obese. And I thought, oh, well, I don't like you, and I'll find a new doctor. And so he said, you really ought to think about losing weight. And so I did. I thought about that. I left there, and I went to a place called the Cold Stone Creamery, and I got a double cone of chocolate and strawberry and a waffle cone, and I thought about it. And I thought, I don't like my doctor, and why should I go anymore? And so a few months later, I had a health crisis. And then, it just hit me, and all at once, I eliminated all of the sugar. So no desserts, no sweets, no nothing like that. I couldn't do it. My idea of a nightcap was, a bowl of ice cream with chocolate syrup. That was my idea. And it just helped you go to sleep, right? It was better than peanut butter cups, right, Jerry? And so I had to quit that. That was no more. And so I lost around 40 pounds. I mean, it was very effective in its change. And then the more I started looking into the issue, do you know what areas of the brain are impacted by the use of sugar? The same areas of the brain that are impacted by the use of cocaine. And so it's a highly refined form of that which touches the same areas of the brain in the use of sugar and cocaine. So the two are unique in that respect. God said to Elijah, you need to eat something, and it needs to be something that's useful to you. Here's the other thing. When you think about the idea of what God said to Elijah, you need to resume. Just like Bill said, you need to come back to a place of going. Elijah was told by God, all right, now you need to get up. And so he told him to get up. And he resumes back to this path and this place of life. He was called to be active again. I started commuting when I taught for Freed Hardin. We taught in Dixon for 6 years and then 2 years on the main campus. So I was on the road 2 days a week, 400 miles round trip, and it was a lot. And so I found myself needing to get into a routine where I was moving regularly. So I walk now every day, and I've walked every day for many years, 2 miles a day, just whether I need it or not. Every morning, that's my routine. I wake up, I go to the coffee pot, I go grab my Bible, I read, and then I go out and I walk. That's just every day. No matter, that's Christmas, that's Thanksgiving, that's no matter what. I'm telling you, these habits, exactly like your brother Bill said, are so critical in those moments. Then God called Elijah to reality. God said, Elijah, I need you to think about something. What had Elijah said? Elijah said, I am the only one that remains. What did God say to Elijah? That's not true. We look at the power of false notions. We replay these negative thoughts, these false notions in our mind, and they bring about real emotions. Elijah was brought down low because he started thinking about something that wasn't true. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. We've reached right at the 7 o'clock mark. How about we all pause for a minute? Unless there was a question or a thought or a comment before we pause and break. You all are just tremendous. I love you all. Did you have something, brother? You were just, did I see you do? Oh, okay. No, I'm teasing. You all are just tremendous. How about we pause? Let's take about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll come back in and reset, and we'll talk about putting some things into practice that can be a benefit to us to interrupt this process of negative thinking. We'll pause for a little bit and come back. You're a treasure.